Vampires. You know them, you love them, you may want to fuck them depending on who you are. Hey, I'm not judging you. You do you, you freaks. And D&D is chock full of them. From Kaz, who's a direct reference to perhaps the origin of all vampires, Vlad the Impaler, to Cazador Sar, Astarion's abusive father figure in Baldur's Gate 3, and the subject of today's video, Strahd von Zarovich, the Dark Lord of the Valley of Barovia, a domain of dread in the Shadowfell. But that's a lot of words that I just said, and I know that not everybody is a scholar on vampire lore, let alone D&D vampire lore like myself. So, if you'll entertain me, like, comment, and subscribe so I can entertain you, and let's learn about Strahd von Zarovich. Despite previous statements, I'm not the biggest expert on the origins of vampires. There are plenty of other videos and sources that are much more in detail about that, but I can go in depth to the origin of this vampire. Strahd is an ancient being, stretching as far back as 1983. 2 years younger than my father, fun fact, as the antagonist of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons module, Ravenloft, being one of the first villains in tabletop gaming to not only be deeply fleshed out, but also have a tragic backstory, a trope most anime lovers know very well. In his youth, before vampirism, before the dark powers of the Shadowfell, Strahd was simply a prince, and a conqueror, just like many young naive royals, and after spending much of his youth roaming and conquering, he settled down in the recently conquered valley of Barovia, which was not always a corner in the Shadowfell, but once just a normal valley in the prime material plane. Then, as time went on, two very consequential things happened to Strahd. One, he started to fear his own mortality, and like many who chase on death, wanted to forestall it as much as possible. And two, he fell in love. Who hath captured the heart of this vampire to be, you may ask? None other than his brother Sergei's own wife, Tatiana. Love truly started more wars than any other thing. Now, a sane man who's starting to develop feelings for his brother's own wife may self-reflect and communicate with his family and understand that these feelings are likely never to be reciprocated because they're, married. But what does Mr. von Zarovich do? Simply make a pact with the eldritch dark powers of the Shadowfell to make himself immortal, which involved the removal of his own brother from the equation. But because these dark powers seemingly work off Disney genie rules, they can't just make Tatiana fall in love with him. So, in order to avoid being with the newly vampiric Strahd, she jumps off a cliff and does not survive. Strahd, super bummed out by this because he apparently didn't see it coming that forcing someone to love you is bad actually, tries to follow suit. But guess what, silly Strahd? You're immortal now, so you just have to live with this for the rest of your unlife. Good job. Eventually, the entire valley of Barovia gets swept up by the mists of the dark powers, being taken to the Shadowfell where we know it is today as a domain of dread. And while our boy von Zarovich is directly in control of these mists, and in control of who comes and goes as he pleases, he himself can never leave, remaining immortal in a prison of his own making. Now, after his tragic origin story, he appears only a few times in the major lore. His first major appearance is in 1098 DR. 26 years prior to that, a uniquely good vampire named Xander Sunstar had encountered a woman named Anna, a fragment of Tatiana's soul which had been trapped in an asylum in Waterdeep. For some strange reason, despite the care that he gave her and all his best efforts, he was unable to turn her into a vampire to prevent her death. And in 1098, he was transported to Barovia by the Dark Powers, probably on purpose, when he met and befriended a young and inexperienced Strahd. Coincidentally, just after swearing to take revenge on whoever was responsible for Tatiana's current state of being. Over the span of 25 years, they got along well, with Xander teaching Strahd von Zarovich many vampiric skills, including speaking with animals and controlling them. After discovering Strahd's true nature, though, Xander does the responsible thing and tries to destroy him, though both of the vampires survive the encounter, with Strahd only being severely injured and Xander asking to see the sun one more time so as to end his vampiric self. But instead of dying, he simply awoke in the nearby demiplane of Forlorn, where he would spend many years becoming a vampire hunter by trade. How he survived? Who knows? Some people think the mists themselves prevented the sun from killing him. I say the writers just wanted to keep him around a little bit longer. Now, this isn't his video, but in case you're curious how Xander's story ends, he joins the Hell Riders and participates in the event known as the Ride with Zariel, pre-Archduke status, which I touched on in this video here. And he, much like most of the Hell Riders, desert and leave Zariel to her archdevil fate. After that, he tries the whole sun sewer slide thing again, and instead of dying, he once again ends up elsewhere, this time in Avernus, to be tortured by the very devils he was there to slay, including his old comrade Haruman, one of the Hellrider generals who didn't take the coward's way out. So there he stays, crucified, kept alive, and begging any adventurers who may pass by to let his soul rest. Look where being the good vampire gets you. Later, sometime in the mid to late 14th century DR, a pair of Hellriders of Elturel had found their way into Barovia via the mists while they were trying to hunt down someone who would assassinate the city's ruler, Lord Delt. Strahd became curious with them and interested in using them as an escape route from Barovia, so he invited them to dinner and charged them with the search of a monster-filled cavern where there was supposedly a portal out of the domain. He also disguised himself as Vladislav, a half-elven warrior, and assisted in searching the caverns. But when it became clear that the portal was not real, he abandoned them, and later confronted the Hellriders when they invaded Castle Ravenloft. This invasion was to find the holy symbol of Helm that belonged to Lord Delt that happened to be in Strahd's possession. Shocker, Strahd was the villain all along. Strahd was defeated in the ensuing battle, but only temporarily, as he tends to be. Sometime in the late 15th century, Strahd had confronted a few more familiar faces: Minsk, Buh, Delina, Creedle, Shandy, and Neris, in an attempt to recover a locket that once belonged to Tatiana, the love of his life. The locket had the power to free them from Barovia, and they narrowly escaped the vampire's wrath. And around the same time, he also encountered the oh-so-enthusiastic Volothamp Jadarm within his domain at the gates of Vallaki. He appeared before him and invited him to dinner at Castle Ravenloft, but Volo, knowing much better, waited until he went away, immediately called Elminster Omar and said, "Take me back home," and then he pieced the fuck out of there, which, to be honest, any sane person would do. Like, same, huh? So Strahd's been around for quite some time, being, at the very least, centuries old while trapped in Barovia. He's often known as the first vampire, which is interesting because Xander Sunstar is already a vampire by the time he meets Strahd, who is still at the time an inexperienced vampire. I'm not quite sure where the timing lines up. I'm not sure if there's some sort of time dilation or anything like that, but all I know is that Strahd is referred to as the first vampire. Whether you want to go with that and he's canonically the first, or there was someone before him, who knows? That's entirely up to you. I'm sure they left that up to interpretation for a reason. But despite that, outside of those few appearances in lore that I mentioned, he appears in two major adventures as of 5e. The Curse of Strahd module, and Vecna Eve of Ruin. The Curse of Strahd module very obviously revolves entirely around Strahd. You are transported to Barovia. Strahd is an active villain. He appears on multiple occasions. He talks to you. He interacts with the party. He is not just some sort of dark lamp or whatever the term is. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but he is an active villain. He actively participates and interacts with the party and makes it seem more intimidating. His very presence is scary to the party, knowing who he is. In Vecna Eve of Ruin, not so much. In Chapter 5 of the Eve of Ruin module, Strahd appears as basically a mini-boss, which makes sense, right? The module is about Vecna, not Strahd, but I feel like it kind of downplays his power a little bit. I don't know if that's just me. It just makes him feel a lot less like an actual threat compared to how he feels in the Curse of Strahd module. So in the Eve of Ruin module, this takes place 400 years in the past. So if your party has already played Curse of Strahd, then the Strahd that they meet in Eve of Ruin more than likely does not know who the party is. He is 400 years younger, so he has no context of who he is, despite the fact that maybe the party does. It just feels like even though he is younger, it takes away from his aura, I guess, just because of the fact that it's more like a haunted house than anything, with Strahd just being the mini boss at the end of it, compared to the Curse of Strahd module, where he's actively a participating villain in the story. You see him multiple times. I could go on this rant for a good bit longer, but I'm just yapping at this point. As far as rewards of beating Strahd is concerned, he has a few good items: braces of armor, bastard sword, composite bow, amulet of proof against detection and location. These are some pretty cool items, but there's nothing that's like super unique to him, like Vecna's hand and eye or Orcus's wand. But despite that, he's definitely earned his spot in the Dungeons & Dragons Hall of Fame as one of the best villains that D&D has ever come out with. Who doesn't love a good vampire with a tragic backstory? Also, I didn't want to mention this at any point in the video because it's technically not relevant, but young Strahd looks like this. Come on, dude. What's with that haircut? We can do so much better than that. And you do, eventually. You have so much aura here, but here... Come on, man. Anyways, that's pretty much going to do it for the Curse of Strahd video. I don't quite particularly know why D&D decided that the beginning of summer was going to be the spooky season, but hey, you know what? Summerween is a concept. I don't see why not. Let's go with it. With all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, do all those funny things that YouTube likes for you to do to make sure that my channel stays alive. We've been getting a lot of good momentum going, so I hope that things continue going in a positive place. And also, if you've gotten the new Ravenloft book, let me know. I personally pre-ordered it. The cards are super cool. The book itself is super nice. I'm personally planning on running a one-shot session with some of my friends who are coming to town in the Innsmouth domain of Dread because I'm a super big Cthulhu fan, despite the problematic aspects of H.P. Lovecraft. But yeah, let me know if you guys are doing any Domain of Dread modules or anything like that. I'd love to hear about it. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.